Hello, and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Ridley, and this is my kitchen, how I found it. We're gonna be continuing on our journey through Japan today with a little stop in Hokkaido. And I thought it would be fun to kind of give a little bit of some extra info about this one. So originally, when I was planning out my whole roadmap for the year, Hokkaido, we had planned on doing a dish called Jingisukan. Now this is actually a pretty simple dish. It is on a domed skillet, and you put usually lamb or beef on there with some vegetables. And the important part is cooking it on this almost helmet dome-shaped skillet. The reason we are not doing that is because I was able to find a cast iron Jingisukan skillet that I think would work on my stove. But because I have an induction stove, it would only be heating from the base of it, as opposed to if you were using something with radiant heat or with fire, it would actually heat up that domed area a lot more. I do think that I would probably be able to produce food with it, but I don't think that it would have been the correct method. I don't think we would have gotten necessarily a great result, and I would have had to make some major changes to everything along the way. So instead, we're doing a quick little switch over to a dish from Hokkaido still. This is going to be called Yaki. And so Yaki, the name of that, I heard a few different variations of where this comes from, but the idea that seems to be the most prevalent is that Chan is the name of metal spatulas on a teppanyaki, which is a teppen, which is a long or a flat griddle surface. So if you've ever seen like Black Ridge griddles or things like that, a flat top that you would then use metal spatulas to cut and maneuver all of the ingredients with. If you've ever been to a hibachi restaurant, it's very similar to that, a flat top grill. And then the sound of the metal spatulas is thought to be where the name Chan comes from. Another thought was that it was oftentimes made by the father or ochan, which seems less likely to me. And another thought was that it was a very fast dish, and so it went along with cha-cha. In any case, the name Yaki is now just sort of a miso butter salmon dish that is then cooked atop vegetables. Now, the particular recipe that I'm doing today, because I do not have a teppen, I have a stove, is going to be one that is inspired by a specific variation made by No Recipes, so I will link that down below. But in this case, it was adapted, so it doesn't need a teppen. It's going to be using a lidded skillet like this one right here. The lid is important because you use that as part of the steaming process for the salmon. So, as far as the ingredients go, it is based around a miso butter. So for that, it's literally butter, some miso paste. Now, for miso paste, there's red, yellow, and white miso. The recipes require white or yellow. I am using white miso in this case. And then a little bit of sugar. So those three together are going to make our miso butter. Then, for the vegetable part of everything, we've got enoki mushrooms. These are optional, but I was able to find them pretty easy at my local Asian market, so I think if you have an area nearby where you can get them, you might as well give them a try. So that's the enoki mushrooms to add a little bit of crunch. And then the rest of the veggies are going to be onions, carrots, and some cabbage. I have scallions here, which are just going to be for chopping and putting as a garnish at the end, but that's still going to be a major part of the color and flavor of everything together. Now, once we have those vegetables in the pan and cooked, we're going to be putting the salmon on top of it, coating it with our miso butter, and then it's getting cooked with a little bit of sake here. The sake is going to add a great umami to everything. The alcohol will cook out of it, but also the lower boiling point is going to allow us to steam this really easily using that sake. So, I am going to do some very brief prepping, just making the miso butter and cutting up some of the vegetables. And then after that's done, we can move to the stove and everything is over there very quick. This should be a kind of throw it together skillet recipe that I'm very excited to give a try. I'm not super familiar with cooking fish, so bear with me, but we're going to do our best. All right, so miso butter is really simple. It's just going to be butter here, which has got just over 2 tablespoons. I've got about a 1/4 cup of miso, and I'm just going to mix these together. You can use a whisk if you want to. I had to pull some butter out of the freezer, and I softened it a little bit throughout the day, so it's a little harder than I would normally like for softened butter, especially if you're mixing it with something soft like miso. So because of that, I'm using something a little bit firmer, which is this rubber spatula. But it should at least allow me to get a good mix together, and I can kind of smoosh it up against the side to still get everything mixed. And then we're gonna add the sugar. Make sure everything is completely homogeneous. And that is absolutely all the steps needed to make this miso butter. Now, it does say in the recipe that depending on the saltiness of the miso, you might not want to use the entire batch for this recipe. I'm not super familiar with cooking fish, so I don't know how salty is too salty. I'll give it a little try, and I'll probably just use the whole batch anyways. But at the end, if it is too salty, I will make sure you know. All right, so luckily it does look like it softened most of the way, so there's a little bit of streaking in the butter, which I will be able to pull out, but all things considered, this is the miso butter for the recipe. All right, so we've got our miso butter already mixed up, so then the next step is just to prep some of the vegetables, which are gonna be the base and the bed for our salmon in the pan. Now for these ones right here, it uses about 100 grams of onion, 100 grams of carrots, and 250 grams of cabbage. Now I don't have full exact measurements on these, but I know that it should be roughly in the area. And because they're all going to be going into the pot at the same time, I'm just going to cut them all up and put them into one bowl so that I can just save on some space and make everything easy to access when it's actually time for us to get cooking. Now for these, it said to cut them into wedges, and so that should be just fairly simple, almost like cutting an apple, but trying to keep this nice little wedge shape going. There's a little bit of green on the outside of this onion, and if that bothers you, it may be a little more tough, so you theoretically could throw that layer out, but I think there's nothing wrong with it, so I'm definitely going to be keeping them. And again, very simple processing. It's just these little wedges for the onions. Put them in the bowl. Then for the cabbage, it says about 2-inch pieces. Again, I'm not even going to really measure too much. I think the important thing is just to get easy pieces that when it comes time to eating, you won't have to worry about having anything too long or noodle-like or too hard to break apart. So we've got our cabbage pieces, once again, cut up very simply. If you do still have the core of the cabbage, make sure that you cut the core out. That was something that was specified. I used the top of the cabbage so that the core would hold it together, and then I have that other half in the fridge so that I can use it for something else. But if you are going to be using that bottom part, make sure you put the core out. You don't want those really super tough leaves. For the carrots, it just said to cut them into, I think the recipe said 1/10 of an inch slices. For me, that's just meaning fairly thin slices. I'm not going to measure these either. I'm going to just cut them on a bias here so that they've got a little bit more size to them. But I think the important thing here is just to get them thin enough that they're going to cook through all the way during the roughly 12 minutes of cooking. And so you don't have them too thick where they're going to end up being big chunks of carrots at the end. And you also don't necessarily want to shave them, although I don't think that would cause problems. It would just reduce a little bit of the texture. If you let them get too thin, they might get a little bit too soft and mush, but that's a preference thing as well. All right, so we've got some carrots, we've got some onions, we've got some cabbage. Last thing is going to be our enoki mushrooms here. Now for these ones, I think I've got roughly about 150 grams. I need about 100 grams. So I'm gonna pull a little bit of these out. Now I am very, very unfamiliar with these mushrooms, but from what I've been told, a big part of these is that they have kind of a little bit of a crunchiness that maintains while you're cooking them. And so these are going to add a little bit additional texture to all of this and should also increase the umami of everything. But because they're getting added with the vegetables, everything can just be stacked together like this. And this is pretty much everything that we need for the cooking step. So we're going to be putting the vegetables in, sauteing those down with a little bit of our vegetable oil. Then we are going to have the salmon coated with a little bit of our miso butter. That'll go over the top. And then we're going to steam them with the sake right here and top them off with our scallions, which I'll chop up right before we move back there. But that is going to be absolutely all of our chanchan yaki items. Let me do a quick little chop through of these, and then we're gonna move back to the stove and get things cooked. Ooh, just reuse this. All right, so we have got our garnish. We have our vegetables, sake, salmon, miso butter. I think that's everything prepped. So move back to the kitchen or to the stove and let's get cooking. All right, now as far as the cooking stage of this, it seems pretty straightforward. So I have got our pan on the heat right now. I've got it just over medium heat. I'm gonna add the tablespoon of oil here and just let that come up to temperature. So this will take maybe a minute or two, but once that's done, we're just going to add all of our vegetables, give them a quick stir around, and let them start to fry down. At this stage, what we want to do is we want to give them a very light wilting. So I'm going to get them in there, and then as they're wilting, we're going to cover our salmon with the miso butter, and yeah, that's really about it. So give this a couple of seconds to heat up. We'll get the veggies in, and we'll get cooking. All right, we have preheated our skillet. The oil has come up to temperature, so we're just going to add in our vegetables here. Get a little simmer on it, that's good. Okay. Now, once those are in there, I'm gonna give them a little quick mix around just to make sure that we've got a decent mix on everything in there, breaking up some of the cabbage bits. And what we're looking for here, not necessarily browning or anything like that, so I'm going to turn it down just a touch. What we want to do is wilt these vegetables just a touch. All right. Now what I am noticing is that the enoki mushrooms are having a tendency, because they're smaller, to kind of come down towards the bottom. So getting under the bottom there and bringing them back up amongst all of the rest of the vegetables, I think is helpful. Beautiful, so we've got that. Now once again, I am just going to be using the whole batch here for the salmon because I'm not entirely sure how salty this will end up or anything like that, how salty the miso is compared to normal miso, so we are just going to trust the process, cover everything on here with this miso butter. And I'm just going to try and get an even layer over all of it. Now what I think is fascinating about this recipe is after we put the salmon in here, this miso butter that's on top is going to melt, and that's going to fall down onto the vegetables that we have below. And so you're going to get that fat as well as the seasoning from the miso butter in the vegetables and on the salmon. And also, since it's going to be starting on the salmon, that's going to act as a constant basting during that, helping to maintain some of the moisture. I'm very excited for this. More here. Okay, and this is going to give us a pretty thick layer, I would say maybe just under 1/4 of an inch across the whole surface of the salmon. But that is our full batch there. We're starting to, ooh, actually the scent that's coming up just from the vegetables is already pretty nice. It's got a sweetness to it from the carrots. The enoki mushrooms have added a little bit there too that I'm not very familiar with because I'm not generally a mushroom fan, but I am very interested to know how this comes out. All right, so we have got our vegetables in here wilted down. We have our covered salmon. We're going to take the salmon and place this right over the top of the vegetables. Kind of seat it in there, because we are going to be putting the lid right on top of this. All right, now, last step is we're going to be putting the sake in. Now this is going to have a a significantly lower boiling point than standard water, so it's going to immediately start steaming. So pour the sake in around on the vegetables, put the lid on to trap the steam in there, and then we're going to reduce the temperature down to a very light simmer and just let it cook for maybe about 10 minutes. Yes. All right, temperature dropped down just a little bit so it can go to a simmer. We're going to keep this covered, like I said, for maybe about 10 minutes. I'll be checking on it in between, but that is just about everything in this. After the 10 minutes, we'll pull the lid off, make sure everything is cooked up done, and then that's Chanchan Yaki. All right, 8-minute timer just went off. Ooh, interesting. All right, so we've got a really nice pink to the salmon. Now I'm gonna do a quick temp check on these. And so we're looking for something in the range of 125 to 145, depending on how you like your salmon. And this is well under. So I'm gonna close this off and give it another 2 minutes, and then we will check it then to see how it's going. All right, so we've got just a couple seconds left on our second heat. Let's give this a check to see where we stand right now. Now I'm using the thicker of the two slices just because that one is going to make sure that we get to an appropriate temperature for both of them. All right, so these 2 minutes, it looks like it's brought us just about to 100 degrees, maybe just over in this one. And this one over here is just about done. So I am going to put another maybe minute and a half on here. It'll mean that this one is going to be closer to the USDA recommendation of 145, but it'll give a little bit more time for the thicker slice to catch up. And also it'll give us a bit of a variety between the two, so we can do more towards the medium rare and more towards the medium well. So we're gonna do another minute and a half and see where we're at there. Beautimous. Let's give it another check. Okay, yeah, it's about there. 124. So this is at the very, very bottom of the acceptable scale. I'm gonna say 1.5 more minutes just to make sure that we are not at the baseline of this is safe to eat. Because again, I'm not super familiar with fish and I'm gonna be a little bit more safe. So 1.5 minutes more, which will bring our total cooking time to about 15 minutes for this. Granted, I probably could have increased the temperature a little bit more. I've had it at a very low temp because I didn't want to go too high, but I wasn't getting a whole lot of steam, so I think that that may have been a part of it. Right now I've got it at 3, I had it down at 2 out of 10, but we'll see. We've got another 1.5 minutes going already, and we will see then if it's ready to go, but I think that we are going to be good in about a minute. All right. Theoretically, we should be good to go. Last little check. $130, I am fine with that. And this one over here. 135, and already pretty slow. So, temperature off, and that is our chan-chan yaki. So, let's go in here and grab out the salmon. Now the recipe says that this should be about 4 servings. I think that that's pretty fair because you could pretty easily cut this up into 4 reasonably sized salmon pieces. We're going to... Ooh, and there's some browning on the bottom with these vegetables. But they've got this really nice sauce around them now because of the miso butter. So I am going to see if I can't pull a little bit of these browning bits from the bottom so that we have that mixed in with the flavor here. I don't think I need to do a full deglaze. It's not stuck on there quite that strong, but I want to get all the flavor that we can from any of that Maillard reaction. Beautiful. So we're going to have our base of vegetables. Now this is not necessarily a super pretty dish, but at the same time, the aroma is spectacular, and it was incredibly easy to put together. So this would be a great one if you just want a very fast meal. Almost all of the prep steps were very quick, and the cooking itself was 15 minutes, and that was with us extending it 50% beyond where I thought it would be, and probably because of my temperature for cooking. But yeah. So we're gonna get our vegetables off to the side here, add in some of those salmon fillets, and then we're gonna move back to the table and taste some Hokkaido food. So give me a second to plate. I'll let Bruce take some B-roll, and then it's tasting time. All right, we have our chan-chan yaki, or miso salmon. So we've got both of them on here so that we can give them a try. So Bruce, on yours over here, this bigger one here is going to be the one that's probably closer to medium rare.
Okay.
This smaller one should be closer to medium well and matches the USDA temperature recommendations. I'm interested to see because some places were saying that this one might be a little bit more on the dry side, but we get to try both.
All right, sounds good. Let's dive right in with the salmon. I want to try that first.
Okay. We're doing...
Go with the medium
Yep.
well, right?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so this one was cooked a little bit longer.
Here we go.
Okay, I do think it's a little more cooked than I would like. It's not necessarily dry, but it's not like fall apart flaky like I've had before with salmon, which is, I guess, because I usually get it at a restaurant where they know what they're doing.
Right.
Flavor-wise, it's good, and I don't think the miso was too salty.
I've never had salmon like this before. For me, it has like a very unique kind of taste, and I really like it.
Okay, well, good.
So,
yeah, I mean, nothing about this tastes like bad salmon for sure. I'm interested to know how the miso butter influenced the vegetables.
Yeah.
Because they really weren't seasoned at all. All the seasoning is that miso butter. And
the other salmon is better.
Oh, the other salmon?
I tried that first instead of the vegetables, but wow.
That one is the temperature
noticeable.
that I think should be more like melts in your mouth.
A noticeable difference, I think. Yeah.
Texturally speaking, an incredible difference. And then also the flavor.
There was more of the butter still on the top for that one, I guess. That's probably the biggest difference, is there was just more of that still stuck on it.
All right.
So yeah, that cheese.
And the miso butter in with the vegetables is a lot of flavor.
Yes, it is.
Like, it's texturally this mismatch of things, but then flavor-wise, I don't know if I could pick out any of the ingredients.
It's really good, though. It's really good. Yeah, let's do this together.
Yes. Now, this is a recipe that I think would do really well served alongside rice.
I can see that, yeah.
Because then this sauce that you've got would mix in with the rice, maybe a little bit of soy sauce to add some of that tanginess, but like...
I don't know. If you have enough of that butter, that might be enough for the rice as well. And yeah, all together...
And I can see
That's
how
the
if it was
dish.
really salty miso, that could overtake this. This is not the case. This is very well balanced. And it's got a little bit of sweetness to it, too, from the sugar.
From the sugar.
Absolutely delicious.
Simply wonderful.
All right, so we're going to finish this up and then probably take out the remainder of our extra salmon that we've got because this is really tasty.
Absolutely.
Next time, we get to move to our next country, which I believe is Spain. So,
España.
in any case, next week we will be shifting to a whole new geographical area, trying some new flavors and some different things. So, thank you for joining us. I hope you join us next time, and I'll see you then.